it's not just Donald Trump that's leaving the White House, his family is too, and what is going to become of them? Because it turns out it is just now dawning on people like Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump that having been affiliated with the guy who tried to overthrow the government might not necessarily be great for their future coastal plans. Sources apparently tell CNN White House correspondent Kate Bennett that both Ivanka and husband Jared Kushner are worried about what they're gonna do next, because last week's riots have provided horrific images that will follow them wherever they go. That has Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump in a bit of a panic as they look into their future, she says. I talked to a lot of sources today who say they're questioning everything now, from where they're going to live after the White House to what their careers will be. And talk about waiting until the last minute to question everything. You thought that it was a good plan to work in the White House for almost half a decade. And like they're worried now about those images, but they were there for the whole thing. They didn't come in at the end. They've been there since the beginning. And so I'm actually of two minds about how much it will actually hurt Ivanka Trump politically. Socially, they're probably toast, at least in New York, I would assume.
Yeah, had it not been though for Wednesday's events, for the violent imagery we saw and this like angry frothing mob trying to break their way into the Capitol, they probably would have been fine. And it's only because the power of like video and those images that they're now not there. As you say, they were fine as Trump deliberately and his administration deliberately separated kids from their parents as they sought to take healthcare away from millions of people that would have resulted in hundreds of thousands of people dying from lack of insurance. This is like a purely disgusting, vicious, vindictive, and violent administration outside of national television cameras. But only because we now have those images are people going to separate themselves from that family. They had no problem in the run up to that. And I think it's just a disconnect for a lot of people, and especially wealthy people who would be completely insulated from any consequences to those decisions.
Yeah. Now, my question for you though is, I know that, I don't know when she says that she has political aspirations, I don't know exactly what that's supposed to mean. I don't know if she thought like Don Jr. clearly does that they're gonna run for president or something. And she seems like a pretty bad fit for the Republican Party. And she doesn't seem like a natural, like she doesn't have the Trump thing, whatever that is. Like I know there's some people who are like, oh, he's got charisma or whatever. I don't think that she has that. But in theory, if she were to run for, Marco Rubio's seat or something like that, in a red state, is the affiliation with Trump really going to hurt that much? I get that nationally it's a bad brand, but in a Republican state, I don't know that it's necessarily gonna hurt her, especially after a cooling off period where people are looking at the Trump administration more holistically and rather than focused, naturally on the violence that just happened. What do you think?
I think that's one of the most delicious aspects of the Trump family is how they resemble, it's almost like Jerry Falwell's son, where they just have none of the skills that Trump, they seem as morally repugnant as Trump. But they don't actually have any of the skills that he does. And so they're sort of tethered to him because once he goes down, like you said, they don't have the, people say his charisma. I think it's clear as the sort of negative charisma. They don't have any kind. And so we're gonna see them sort of flail. Can you imagine what Trump Jr. also is gonna have to do? These guys, they probably haven't worked a real job in their entire life. So that it's sort of amusing to me to see how they're gonna have to chart this. Because Trump is quite old too. They'll have to figure it out sooner or later, but I do think it'll be hard for them in the kind of blue states that they come from.
Yeah, I think perhaps politically, I think in terms of jobs, I am confident that they will not have to ever have a job. I think that we can debate about how rich they actually are. I think they're rich enough to not work, basically.
Yeah, Ivanka's probably gonna be the most stable, and maybe Eric to an extent. The one who's really gonna struggle is Don Jr. because he's clearly the dumbest of the bunch. And he's really like gone all in on this like, oh, did I trigger the libs type like worldview? Where Eric and Ivanka always have a much more serious tone. Eric's wife, Lana, is considering running for Senate in I think South Carolina. And Ivanka and Jared, Jared's got a portfolio of business properties and other endeavors and comes from a business and real estate family. they'll be fine. The one who's really gonna flounder is Don Jr. So it's gonna be a series of, I'm sure, like attempts to recreate Barstool Sports, but even somehow more racist, and just a bunch of like lowbrow books called "Oh, Did I Trigger You?" and like 100 Ways to Trigger the Libs. Like that's his.
You know what?
Oops, I triggered again.
He's like,
hey, that's a good one.
He's like the Spencer's Gifts of politicians. Just this shock jock garbage. And it's like, dude, you're like 45. Grow up, man.
Seriously, totally the Spencer's Gift. Okay, sort of related to this, we were gonna go through some different polling about how much the brain has been hurt, but I'm gonna jump to that last one just because hidden in here is just a little bit of maybe good information. I don't know. In terms of how much it's really hurt them for the Republicans, at least for Trump himself, let's go to this. Nothing says fun like looking ahead to the 2024 Republican primary, but I swear there's something here. So let's bring this up. And obviously, right now Trump is still number one at 42%. Pence, you know, the guy he was willing to have murdered, is in number two. So that's gonna be a fun debate. Trump Jr.'s in third, but at 6%. But do you know what I think is most interesting on there? I don't know if you can even read these, but the most fun number on that entire thing. And it's not Hogan at 0. Josh Hawley is at 1%.
Yeah.
He just stood with Trump like he was the guy. Cruz and him were the guys. The two guys in the Senate that did the most, like, hey, end democracy, all that, the fun stuff. They're at 7% combined.
I don't know
they
if you
better
guys saw,
hope that Trump gets banned.
The polling that came out today was astonishing. You're kind of seeing the numbers shake out. There's been some variation, I think, as people decide what they believe. And it looks like a majority of Republicans approve of what happened. The poll, I mean, it wasn't an overwhelming majority. I think it was something maybe like 55 or 60%. But clearly, maybe this hurt him, but it's not going to, I don't think it's going to be this sort of, just complete end for Trumpism. There's clearly still a constituency for that kind of stuff.
Well, the thing that's so weird about that is, why would so many Republicans be so supportive of Antifa sacking the Capitol? I don't get why. What do they have to do with it? What dog is in the fight for them? Like, the whole thing is like, such nonsense.
It's like it's a quantum state where for some of that, they're both Antifa in disguise, sacking the Capitol. But then for the ones who like him, he's not Antifa, and they kind of go back and forth. Yes. So it's a very complicated scientific property there.
Well, really fast. There's a perfect example of that. Obviously, the people who don't want to reconcile with the fact that people who agree with them politically beat cops to death say that those people were actually Antifa. The guy who got arrested for beating the cop at the flagpole says, no. I didn't think I was fighting a cop. I thought I was beating Antifa. And that seems like the most Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man thing.
Right.
Like, who isn't Antifa in this entire city right now? Anyway. Okay. Sorry, Jordan, continue.
Oh, I was gonna go back to the polling, but if you want to move on.
No. If you have thoughts about the polling, let's do it.
Sure. I mean, I think the Trump number also reflects like recency bias and a general sentiment that people just aren't over the results of the election. Mm. So I think that's something to consider when we look at that. It just seems like it could be an outlier, and certainly polling will change, public opinion will change in 4 years. Another factor is how Republicans are going to see impeachment. And certainly they're not going to look at it as a process to exercise judgment and act on their conscience. That's never going to be that with Republicans. It's going to be, how do we control power, and who do we delegate it to, and that kind of stuff. It's in everybody in the Senate's best interest to convict Trump, because it consolidates power behind McConnell. I think you and I talked about that on Damage Report on Tuesday. McConnell could become the singularly most powerful Republican in the country if they vote to convict Trump. It opens up the door for Hawley. It opens up the door for Cruz. If they do not convict him, all of their 2024 hopes get dashed, or at least significantly and negatively impacted. So if you're looking at it from a pure, like, cynical political play, they're gonna vote to convict him. They will turn around and be like, oh, we did this out of we're so conflicted. We're acting on our conscience. Today, McConnell told the press, this is a vote on your conscience. That's how they're framing it. Because then, just hapless liberals will see that and be like, oh, okay, wow, I guess, thank you, Mitch McConnell. I'm proud. I'm so proud to be an American. Thank you for standing up for what's right. No, it's all about power and consolidating power in their hands and gets him out of the picture.
I think you're right, but the crazy thing is the people who stand the most personally to gain from Trump being blocked from running want it to happen the most, but least want themselves to be the ones who make it happen. Like there have to be 17 or 16 Republican, I'm great at math, Republican votes. And in theory, 4 or 5 of those could be in the Senate right now wanting to run next time. And it would benefit them, but is it gonna benefit them if Trump supporters remember them to the end of their days as the person who blocked their god emperor from running for office again? Between a rock and a
I think people are just gonna forget. People are gonna forget about not Trump, but just in general, they'll fixate on something new because he won't have Twitter. He won't be able to inject himself into the conversation as easily as he could for the last 4 years.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.